Hey guys, how's everybody doing? I know, you're seeing the cultivated life. You're seeing, all of this stuff changed up. What's going on here? We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Hang tight. We'll be there. I promise. We're going to get there. I wanted to just share some things with you tonight that I think is going to be really beneficial. And recently I heard something that says the most productive years of a person's life is between 60 and 70 years of age. Now, I want to say that again. I heard that I know some of y'all are looking at me like, he didn't hear that right. He didn't turn his hearing aids up. The most productive time in a person's life is between 60 and 70 years of age, which is wonderful news for me. It's wonderful news for Sharon and I because we're both in that gap between 60 and 70, just barely. We're not 61 yet. Sharon just turned 61, and I will be turning 61 here in a few days. So we're just into that 60 to 70 year range, and we're so excited because we really do feel like that God is kind of positioning us to be extremely productive in the next few years. Now, the question I've been asking myself is, what have I been doing with my life so far? Am I the only one that feels like this? Like, what in the world have I been doing for the last 60 years? Well, I figured it out. I've been getting ready for this decade of my life. The first 60 years that Sharon and I have been living, we believe that we have been preparing for this decade that we're in right now. So when I think of everything that we've been through as a couple, when we were kids, both being raised in pastors' homes, moving cities, we've had some wins, we've had some failures, we've had some good days, some bad days. All of that has been preparing us for what we are going to be bringing to you through the cultivated life. I'll talk about that in just a moment. I'll talk about it. I'm going to get there. Hang on. Recently, Sharon and I did our young adult small group at our house, which always happens at our house, but we usually kind of vacate the premises and let the young adults have it. But this last spring series in our community groups, Sharon and I taught through the Bible. In 3 months, we gave them a 30,000-foot view of the Bible, starting at Genesis, going through Revelation. And it was so much fun. We had I think we probably averaged around 26 or 27, but we had as high as 35. We had as low as about 22 or 23, but it was so much fun. At the end of every lesson, I gave them what I called life hacks for young adults. Something that I wish somebody would have told me in my 20s. And it was just different principles. It would take about 10 minutes. It wasn't a huge thing. And so I'm thinking, what do I, in hindsight, looking back, what do I wish someone would have told me? Now, okay, let's be honest. I probably wouldn't have listened. Don't tell them. I probably had somebody telling me something and I wasn't listening because, when you're 22, you do know a lot. I mean, like 99% of the wealth of knowledge in the world, at 22, right? All your parents are just like, oh, God help us. Yeah. But here's what happens is Sharon and I have been talking about our future and about making the greatest impact possible. We've been talking about the next 10, 15, 20 years of our life. And the question keeps coming up, how do we share the knowledge? How do we share the wisdom, the revelation? How do we take 60 years of life and squeeze it into a package and somehow get it out to people that we think might be interested in hearing some of the lessons we've learned? We both have 60 plus years of life on us. We have 40 years of marriage, more than 40 years of marriage. We have more than 40 years of ministry. We've been in Toledo pastoring and raising our family for the last 30 plus years. And so we're saying, how do we do this? How do we do this? Here's the crisis, the squeeze, the tension, whatever word you want to put around it. Here's what we're seeing is when we came here to be pastor 30 plus years ago, 32, 34 years ago, we had 4 services a week. And I spoke normally on a normal week, 3 of those gatherings I was teaching or preaching. And some of those I would preach 20 minutes and sometimes I'd teach an hour. I mean, there was, it wasn't just like get in, get out. I mean, it was like we were spending some time in the Word. And so nowadays, here we are, and you've probably heard me say this if you've been around very long at all or around me. Now we have an average of 3 times a month as opposed to 3 times a week. The average Christian shows up at church 3 times a month as opposed to 3 times a week. Where used to, I would have an average of, say, 150 times a year to be able to disciple people and pour into people and talk to people and encourage people. Now I have about 40 times a year. And so you can see the challenge that we have and the challenge that we're facing in, number one, sharing the revelation, sharing the knowledge, sharing the wisdom, sharing the things that God's put into our spirit. But also, the flip side of that is raising up disciples. Discipleship is becoming a lost art, and that is highly concerning to Sharon and I. So here's the plan. I said all that to get to this. We are launching tonight the Cultivated Life. The Cultivated Life. We are really excited about this as we kind of ease into this. And I say we're launching with a soft launch. There's no big thing happening outside of just what we're talking about here tonight. So in the Cultivated Life, we want to help people raise to the level of their potential. So we believe that every believer, every man and woman has the potential, and many of us are living below the level of our potential, right? So the question is, how do we raise to the level of our potential? The definition of cultivate is to prepare or to use, to prepare something for the use of raising crops. To prepare for the use of raising crops. Here's the sentence that they put with that, all right, in the dictionary. Some fields are cultivated while others lie fallow. So to cultivate is to loosen, to break up the soil so that the soil can be productive. So many believers, the soil of their soul, your soul is your mind, your will, and your emotions. The soil of your soul has become fallow. It's become hard. It's become unproductive. It's become dead, if you will. And so we believe that the cultivated life is to stir up the mind, the will, and the emotions to move the soil of the soul so that you can become productive, raising to the highest level of your potential. Now, we're going to be talking about marriage stuff. We've been through some marriage stuff in 40-some years. We're going to be talking about highs and lows. We're going to be very vulnerable and telling some very raw stories about what that means. We're going to talk about home life. What does it mean to have a healthy home life and a healthy family life? We're going to talk about finances. We're going to talk about generosity, how we view money, how we view generosity, and how we handle our finances. I'll let you in on that secret. she handles the finances. Don't tell her I said so. I'm just saying. I just say, you know what? She's good at it. I'm going to give you this right now. All right. When we first got married, I was going to be the man of this house. All right. I know, calm down. It was 42 years ago, right after Noah came off the ark. It was the Ancient of Days. Jesus, I don't even know if he'd been born yet. It was so long ago. I was going to be the man of the house. I was going to run the finances. And after just a few weeks, I realized I don't want this job. I'm horrible at this job. I can't figure out what I'm doing half the time. So for the last 42 years, Sharon has done an amazing job of handling our finances. Anyway, we're going to talk all about that stuff. We're going to talk about leadership. Leadership, like what does it mean to lead a family? What does it mean to lead your children when they're children? But then how do you transition that leadership when they become adults? We're going to talk about leadership on your job, leadership in your church, leadership in a ministry. We're going to talk about different ministries and how we can serve in various ministries, gifts, you name it. We're going to talk about all kinds of self-development. It's really just one word. Just one word. Discipleship. That's the thing that we feel the urgent need to lean into, because so many are living below the level of their calling. They're living below the level of their potential, and they're not able to make the impact that they could and should because they have not been discipled. So Sharon and I are going to be sharing on a variety of topics to help cultivate your life so that you can become more effective and more efficient in what you produce in your life. None of us can dictate where we start. And I think this is where sometimes we get stuck, if you will, maybe behind, I don't know how better to say it, but we feel like we kind of get stuck behind the 8 ball. And I don't know much about pool, but I just know you don't want to get stuck behind the 8 ball. In what little bit I know, you don't want to get stuck there. But some people feel like they get stuck in that place, and they didn't get a good start in life. How's that sound? They didn't get a good start in life. Here's the thing. We can't dictate where we start in life, but we can connect to God and His preferred future for our life. Now, I want to say that again because that phrase is very important. God gives us the freedom of choice. We are free moral agents. We have the opportunity to say yes, no, high, low, in, out, I'm here, I'm there. We have all kinds of choices in life. But God has a preferred future for our life. And this is really important for you to think about and understand, is God has a preferred future for your life. The scripture actually says in Psalms 139, about verse 6, and you can correct me in the comments if I've got this wrong, but it's 139 and 6 or 16, maybe it's 16, that God wrote a book about your life. He wrote a book about your life. And you can either live in that book, His preferred future, His preferred plan and purpose, or you can live outside the book and do anything you want to do. And so what we want to do is we want to help you live under the blessing and the favor of God's preferred future for your life. Now, no matter where you started, God has a redemptive plan. He told Israel, He says, I'm going to make up to you the years that's been stolen. Now, some of you listening right now probably would identify with that phrase and think years were stolen through addiction, years were stolen through a bad marriage, years were stolen through a home that wasn't healthy and it just wasn't functional. Years were stolen through 1,000 other things that can snatch the years out of our life. God redeems not just people, God redeems time. And you need to lay hold of that promise. You need to lay hold of that confidence that God has a way of catching us in our wandering about and moving us into his preferred future for our lives. So our goal is to simply share information, to share principles that can help you cultivate your life. So the cultivated life is not something we can do for you. We can share tools, we can share ideas, we can share thoughts, but you have to be the one to put in the work. Now, let's talk about that for a little bit here. I've got my Bible. I always like to have a physical Bible. If you have a physical Bible close by, grab that. And I want us to look into Matthew 13, all right? So look into Matthew chapter 13, and let's see what the scripture is saying here. So Jesus is talking. He's giving us parables. And at the beginning of Matthew 13, he tells the parable of the sower and the seed. He talks about four kinds of soil, right? In the four kinds of soil, and he's telling this story of sowing and reaping, right? Agriculture, he's identifying with his listeners. It was a very agricultural culture, and so he was totally telling the stories that made sense to them, right? And then they ask him later, they're like, why do you tell these parables? And he explains the purpose of parables in verses 10 down through 17. And in verse 18 of Matthew 13, he actually explains the parable that he tells. Now, most of the time he doesn't do this. Jesus told a few dozen parables, and most of the time he never explained the parable. He left it to where it was layered. He left it to where you kind of got whatever you got out of it. If you wanted something deep, you could deep dive on it. If you just wanted the story, the entertainment of the story, then that's what you walked home with. But in this particular setting, he actually explains the parable from the beginning of 13. And here's what he says: when anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, this is the sower, he says, the evil one comes and snatches away what has been sown in his heart. This is what was sown along the path. So that's the first kind of soil, is the pathway soil, the soil that's been worn down, the soil that's been hardened. It's not available for seed. As for what was sown on the rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet has no root in himself, but endures for a while. And when tribulation or persecution arises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. So this is the next level of soil. It's rocky soil. Something's going to grow. It's not going to last. We're going to come back and break these down. As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. So there's the thorny ground. So we have three grounds right now. We have the wayside, or the pathway ground, worn down, the stony ground, and then we have the thorny ground. As for what was sown on good soil, this is the fourth soil. This is the one who hears the word and understands it. He indeed bears the fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another case 60-fold, and in another 30. Here's the four types of soil. Liken soil to your soul. Your soul is your mind, your will, and your emotions. We talk about this all the time. Your mind, your will, and your emotions. The pathway soil is when your mind, your will, and your emotions have become so packed and worn out, you're emotionally locked down. Your will has become hardened and stubborn. Your mind is exhausted and you just can't take any more knowledge. This is the pathway soil. And when the seed of the word, the seed of this book right here, gets thrown into your soul, your mind, your will, and your emotions, nothing is produced because it's hard. It's the pathway. But then there's the rocky ground, and this is where the word gets thrown into some people's hearts. Soul, mind, will, and emotions are like rocky ground in that it grows up. There's a lot of joy. Oh man, look what happened. Look, I heard this message and look what God did. But there's no root there. There's no root. So around part of my landscaping, I have river rock. And I'll get little grasses that grow up, or I'll get weeds that'll grow up. It's real easy to pull up because there's just no roots there. It's just barely hanging on. It's just something got a little, just enough dirt to develop a root, but it's not enough root to hang on. And so when the tribulation comes and the persecution comes, they die out. And then there's the seed, the word, that gets thrown onto the thorny ground, and it grows up and it looks like something is going to be produced, but the cares of life, your job, your hobbies, your extracurricular activities, your scrolling, the cares of this life choke it out so that the word can't have effectiveness in your life. But then there's the fourth soil, and this is the goal of the cultivated life. This is what we want to accomplish. We want to help you become good ground. We want you to have a healthy mind. We want you to have a healthy emotions. We want you to have a healthy will. Now let me show you how this goes. Unhealthy will is you get a strong, stubborn will, or you have no will at all and you just get run over. You become a doormat, right? What is the balance? It is the will of God. So we want you to develop a healthy soul so that you can walk in the will of God. Now, what about your mind? Well, unhealthy one way is you can't make a decision. The other one is you just make decisions all the time. You're just like machine gun decisions. Your mind is overworking over here, but underworking over here. What is it? The mind of Christ. So we have the will of God. We have the mind of Christ. That's the balance. And then what about our emotions? Well, there's two kinds of emotions too that the enemy loves to play with, and that's flatline, trauma, disappointment. You shut your emotions down. Other people respond like this, where they have highs and lows. They're emotionally roller coasters. That's not the will of God. The emotion is the joy of the Lord is our strength. So our goal, Pastor Sharon and I, we want to be able to pour into you guys through the Cultivated Life. This is going to be books, it's going to be podcasts, it's going to be teachings here at Life Chapel and other places. We want to pour into you so that you have a healthy soul, so that you are able to produce. Some of you will actually produce 100-fold. Some of you will produce 30, and some of you will produce 60. The bottom line is you're going to produce good fruit in your life. Let me wrap it up with this. I like to play golf. I'm not a good golfer. I have a set of golf clubs. I like to get out. I like to enjoy the outdoors. I like to, be out in good weather. Years ago, I was playing golf at this golf course up in Michigan, and I noticed that all of the fairways were lined with these beautiful rock walls that stood maybe only 2 feet high. I mean, it wasn't like they were keeping something in or something out. But all the fairways at the golf course were lined with these just stacked rocks. And I was talking to the golf pro and about the walls. He's like, well, you know where that comes from. And I'm like, no. And he said, well, all of those rocks were out in the fields. And as we begin to cultivate that dirt and plant that grass and build those greens and tee boxes, we found all these rocks. You see where I'm going? And we just took them over here and we just used them along the fairways. Now, I looked at all of those rocks and I thought, that's a bunch of rocks. And you know what I found about my own life? Life, my soul, my mind, my will, and my emotions was full of a bunch of rocks. Sharon and I have spent the last 60 years working on ourselves. We were hurting people. We were just ignorant, you know. We tried this, we tried that, but we kept working on ourselves. We made up our mind we were going to be readers. We were going to be students of the Word. We were going to be people of prayer. Now, we don't have it figured out. We feel like we've got another 20 years of learning left in us, but we want to take the 60 years that we've been working our field, cultivating our life, picking up the rocks, stacking them off to the side. We want to take what God's given to us and we want to share that with you. That's why we're calling it the Cultivated Life. I hope you'll be joining us on a regular basis right here on Wednesday nights as we talk about various topics, as I mentioned earlier. Be watching because we'll be talking about some of the books that we're putting out. I've got a new book coming out here in the next few days. I've got actually probably between now and the end of the year, between Sharon and I, we'll have 5 or 6 new books coming out. These are things that we've just had in our spirit, we've had in our lives, and we just want to roll them out to you. So we really look forward to sharing our life with you and the wisdom, the revelation, the knowledge, the insights that God's given us as we've cultivated our lives. We want to help you cultivate your life. Hey, let me say a prayer over you before we go. Thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you'll share this podcast. I hope you will like the podcast. Go to the Cultivated Life Facebook page. Join us there. We'll be dropping stuff there that we're not dropping on our personal pages and that we're not dropping on the church page because this is where we're going to start pouring our information in. All right, let me pray over you. Father, I just thank you for our time together. I thank you for all of those who've joined us on the podcast tonight. We're just asking you to bless Sharon and I so that we can properly convey, so that we can share the things you put into our lives. Now, Lord, we pray over the listeners, those who are watching right now, and we just pray that you would bless them and help us to help them live the cultivated life. God bless you. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday night right here. Watch the Cultivated Life Facebook page as we just drop little nuggets along the way. God bless you. We look forward to seeing you soon.